So we've had quite a theme going here today, starting out with talking about the new sister agency and Kirsten's, 3 weeks there, and then combating the cyber mafia, which is amazing. And now we're going to join to go through to ransomware. So, basically combating and outpacing ransomware. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but it's not easy. And I'm sure our panelists have a lot of war stories that they can tell you. We have some panelists that are going to join us late because in cybersecurity, as you all know, we cannot predict when we're needed. So I'm going to be introducing Kim Peretti, who is a veteran lawyer and a civil servant in the government, fighting cyber crime and cyber extortion, and working on a lot of incident response cases over the years. And so Kim is actually a partner at Alston Baird, and I want to also introduce Roselle Safran, who won an award last night for having a hot technology cybersecurity company called Key Caliber. So congratulations to you, Roselle. And Roselle has a long history of working with the administration, some of the previous administrations in a cybersecurity position. We potentially will be joined by Jennifer Tong from VeriSign, and also MJ Thomas from GDIT Bath Ironworks. They are having a little bit of technical difficulty, and we're not sure if they're going to be able to join us. But I'm going to pinch hit for a little bit, and I'm going to let Kim take the reins here, and Roselle, and maybe they can give you a little bit about their backgrounds, and then start the conversation.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. Maybe I'll just spend a minute and provide a little bit of additional color. I'm a partner at this law firm in the DC office, Alston & Bird. I've been both a lawyer and an information security professional, yes, both, for 22 years now, switching hats throughout my career. Most of my career has been spent at the Department of Justice, prosecuting hackers out of the criminal division's computer crime and intellectual property section. Just about 13 years ago, after we were able to put one of our most prolific hackers behind bars for 20 years, PwC approached me and asked me if I wanted to join their firm and help build out the cyber forensic unit, which I did, and spent a couple years doing complex investigations of state-sponsored hacks. And then just about 9 years ago now, we really started to see the need for lawyers who understand information security to help advise on complex incident response and cyber risk resulting from those types of attacks. And I joined this firm to help build out a cybersecurity practice. And I spend, I would say, 80% of my time helping companies respond to incidents. And we have had an ongoing ransomware incident for one client or another going back all the way till mid to end 2019. So it's really where we've spent most of our time on the incident response for ransomware, and then helping companies as best we can prepare for and to hopefully prevent against ransomware attacks. And happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was wonderful. And I've met you a long time ago when you were working on the TJ Maxx case. And so I'll never forget that. That was quite the case. So thank you for being with us today. And Roselle, can you pick up the reins and talk a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Also, thank you for having me. It's an exciting panel here. So I do not have quite as much experience as Kim, but I have been in cybersecurity for over 15 years now. I was originally a computer forensic analyst. Eventually moved to the Department of Homeland Security in the division that was then called US CERT. And there I was leading the malware and forensic analysis teams. And from there, I moved to the Executive Office of the President, and that was during the Obama administration. And I was leading the cybersecurity operations. So running the 24/7 SOC that defended and protected the network used by the White House and the rest of the agency. And then from there, I switched gears and moved to the entrepreneurial side. And this is now my second cybersecurity startup that I've founded, as Mary Beth mentioned. It's called Key Caliber. And what our technology does is automatically identify crown jewels, critical assets, so that those can be prioritized for patching, for making sure the correct controls are around it, and for making sure that resources are allocated in an optimal way. Thank you for inviting me here.
Awesome. Thank you, Roselle. So I'm going to level with you guys. I've been on the other side of it. My hair's on fire with clients for about 8 years. And I know it's possible to get to the other side, but I would love to hear more from you. I mean, I have companies that CEOs have been crying. They don't know what to do. Very large ransomware payments had to be negotiated down from 5 million to 350 to 400,000, which is kind of the average. So I've been through all of that and seen teams work to save people's data and then find out that, yes, sometimes they don't get their data back. But how do they do this prevention piece that you're talking about and being proactive when they have to be reactive? We would love to hear more about that from both of you. So I don't know who wants to start first, but Kim, maybe you?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. It's really interesting. There's been quite a bit of information that's been pushed out about how to prepare for and prevent, take technical steps to prevent against a ransomware attack. That's information from our government through ransomware.gov, through CISA and the Department of Justice. That's regulators such as New York State Division of Financial Services. That's law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, multi-state ISACs. I mean, there's so much guidance that in some ways it's a little bit overwhelming. But if you look at it and you compile it together, it really does come down to about 8 to 10 different things. And the government feels quite strongly, and insurance companies also have weighed in, that if you take these steps, you'll decrease your chance of a ransomware attack significantly. And the insurance companies are convinced of it. That's why if you try to get cyber insurance now, you have to go through the renewal process, and they present you with these spreadsheets and say, do these things, and then they're likely to give you cyber insurance for ransomware attacks. So I won't go through all of them, but just a couple of them are multi-factor authentication, MFA, probably the number one out of all the guidance out there. Every single piece has multi-factor. Have multi-factor in place for your remote access and for your internal administrator accounts. Another one is, of course, before we moved into the data leakage aspect of ransomware, it was all about segregating and segmenting networks and making sure you have offline backups and that you back up your data. So we've kind of moved from the backup of data and have the backups to these other measures, which are more secure cybersecurity hygiene. So I think that's my theme from today. If you look at all of this guidance, there are a number of controls that are very common, and it really goes back to basic cyber hygiene. Just a couple more: strong passwords. And this is all in CISA's recent guidance. They have these wonderful books and their wonderful boxes in their recent guidance that says immediate actions you can take now to protect against ransomware. Multi-factor, segregate networks, update your operating systems and software, make offline backups, don't click on suspicious links, update your operating software, use strong passwords, and again, multi-factor. So those are just a couple technical controls I would throw out there.
And changing those passwords. I once had a ransomware case where they didn't change the root password on the main servers in a data center. And so they were able to access all the servers through that password, and it was out on the internet for the hackers to see. And it had nothing to do with the ransomware. So sometimes, people put one and one together. And so changing those passwords, having cyber hygiene, Kim, I totally agree with you. So Roselle, maybe you can add to that from your time of in the space.
Yeah, so I like to just use the NIST CSF framework for whenever I'm thinking about something on the strategic level. And so first stage of that is identify. And so the first order of business is to identify what's most critical, what you are really concerned about having a loss of availability. And then furthermore, what's connected to that? And if that goes down, would that create this cascade effect where something really important goes down? So that identify step is really crucial to getting the right foundation. And then the other steps will build upon that. So then in the NIST CSF framework, the second step is protect. So understanding what's critical and then building the right protections against that. So that's your antivirus, that's your email security, your firewall, the preventative measures. And then the third step is detecting, because the preventative steps are not going to be foolproof, and there will be times when they will fail. And so having that visibility on the network level, on the endpoint level, there's now XDR, which can sometimes cover many of those bases. Getting that insight so that when something does come up, you can react to it. That's the next phase. And then after that, of course, you have the response phase, where when something does happen, prevention doesn't work, detection detects something, and then you have to respond to it, having visibility. So having both the technologies and the processes in place for when a response happens. So that's when you call in Kim and her team when something does happen and there needs to be this investigation, or you're working with an outside vendor who's doing incident response. Having beforehand a very strong understanding of what that response effort is going to look like. So you know who you're going to call, what their number is. You already have your agreements in place before something goes down. And then, of course, the last phase is recover. And so from a technology perspective, that's having the right backups. And I know that's very challenging in some environments, but the best way to respond and recover from a ransomware attack is to just say, you know what, you're trying to lock us out? Fine, try that. That's not going to work because we already have everything that you're trying to lock us out of. And so understanding what that entails means you have to first know what's important that you have to back up, and then actually have the rigor around doing that backup and doing it at a frequency that makes sense for your environment.
Roselle, that's great. And I guess I have a question. I think we're going to bring Jennifer on in a minute. But I've been in situations where, okay, they've been a little bit trained. They've maybe done a tabletop exercise to see how they would react during a ransomware case or just an incident of some kind, data leakage. But what happens when you have to coordinate, like you said, between Kim is as a breach coach or a lawyer who's going to advise them on privacy, data security, data privacy, and the rights of their clients and their partners, and then also what they have to do to stay within FinCEN, right? And then if it's a ransomware case, so you have to go ask permission to pay. You have to get the insurance company, if you have the insurance, to get them to pay the insurance. And a lot of my contacts in insurance, because I did cyber insurance for 12 years in the early days, is now they're thinking they're not going to pay, right? And so there's a big disconnect. So how does a company whose hair is on fire, the CEO has never been through this, the IT department, maybe they have one security person, how do they deal with that? And how do they coordinate all of that? And I don't know if Jennifer wants to jump in on that as well, but whoever wants to take that question.
I would say, first of all, you're making the assumption that you should pay the ransom.
Yeah.
And I would argue that in most cases, it's better if you don't, because if you can avoid paying the ransom, you are putting the whole industry in a better situation. If no one paid the ransom, there would be no ransomware attacks. The only reason why they're prevalent and gaining in prevalence is because people are paying the ransom. And so we're only propagating this problem and perpetuating it by paying the ransom. So that's why I go back to, if you're prepared and you can just recover internally without having to pay the ransom, that's actually the ideal situation. Now, granted, I know that's the ideal, and that's different from actuality. And so I'll let Kim and Jennifer go into what to do when you're going through those steps.
Yeah, and I'd love to, because I do think it's so challenging. And what Roselle said is right. It'd be great if no one paid; they wouldn't have an industry. But we have $750 million that has been paid in ransom payments since January 1st, 2020. Every client I've ever worked with starts from the premise they don't want to pay, and they're not going to pay a criminal actor. Everyone starts there. No one starts with, of course, we definitely want to pay. So everyone starts, but we have that many payments. That says, well, why are they paying? That's the problem we're facing. So let's talk about a response. And Mary Beth, you mentioned a couple, maybe 3 out of the 20 things that companies have to work through in 72 hours. It's a crisis, a complete crisis event. The way I break it down is there's 4 work streams that have to be stood up in parallel. And the company has not had this happen before, right? And they're not going to be able to know immediately what to do, but hopefully the tabletops have helped them, and they call in experts that have, done hundreds of ransomware incidents and can set up these 4 work streams. So one of them, I think you heard, this mentioned a lot. You have to have sort of a data impact and a restoration work stream to identify what impact the ransomware has had to your systems, how you might be able to restore your data and systems. That may be immediately possible and it may not. So that's one area. And the next area is communications, right? Because you've got about 24 hours when you're under a ransomware attack where you might be able to say service outage, but very quickly in today's world, everyone's going to guess ransomware, and you're going to have employees and possibly the public, possibly media and customers wondering what's happening. So you need to start to prepare on the communications. I think the most important I'll cover is the legal aspect. So you likely are going to need to engage with the criminal actor. You may have no desire to pay at all and not want to pay. But if you don't engage with the criminal actor, and there's certain entities you hire that are specialists in engaging with these criminal actors, it's not often your forensic firm or your lawyers, but these third-party intermediaries. If you start to interact with them, you may understand and get to know what they have. They might tell you they've stolen data. They might provide a sample of data. And then hopefully you can sort of extend out, negotiating with them for up to 14 days in some cases. We're sort of past the immediate where you get this ransom note that says you have to pay in 24 hours. They passed that because they realized they wouldn't get paid and they want to get paid. So if you engage with the criminal, you have to be prepared to engage with the criminal. You might learn important things that can help protect your company as you, push them off and take more steps to get your company's systems back up and running and other things. So I think really understanding these work streams. The legal one, of course, has interacting with insurance, making sure you take some immediate steps to notify insurance if you have insurance. You're going to want to know everything about the threat actor. You can understand your forensic firm might tell you information, these third-party intermediaries. All of that goes into doing your due diligence checks, the OFAC checks. Now, again, you may have no desire to pay, and hopefully you can find a way to get back operations running and not have to pay, or you make a decision that the data they've stolen is you're comfortable if they leak it. Most companies don't take that position. They're not comfortable having data leaked, or they're not comfortable with the time frame it may take them to restore, and that's why they often make a decision to pay. But you're going to want to work through all of that work stream. So if you need to pay, you can. And then lastly, I would also say, we have the communication. We have investigations now because these criminal actors are getting into systems and they're able to move around systems. They're often looking for data stores where they can easily, export out gigabytes of data. They don't often care what the data is, but they're going to ransom you they're going to extort you for that data. So you want to have immediate forensic investigators conducting an investigation. Sometimes you can do it internally, but again, it's depending on the skill set. And they're going to be able to help you understand what happened in your system. So you can, again, decide, is this a hoax? Do they really have a terabyte of data? Do they not? What data is it? And you're going to be scrambling as quickly as you can against the time frame you have to push out the criminal actors from taking any steps they may take.
Great. That was great, Kim. Thank you. So Jennifer, nice to have you with us. Jennifer Tong is joining us. So Jennifer, maybe you can comment a little bit further on some of those, many steps you have to take in 24 hours that stretches to 2 weeks, and how do companies navigate that, big and small, and also people that have, ties to government contracts and things. How are they navigating these extortion ransomware cases? And then we'll hear from MJ, who is also joining us, and talk through that, because I think today, even small companies have contracts with the government, or they have a contract with a contractor who has a contract with the government. And all these things, as you heard this morning from Kirsten, they're going to be very important as we go through to zero trust and we rebuild sort of from the executive order, we rebuild how we're going to be communicating with each other on digital assets.
So you mentioned the appointments and what you're doing in the first 24 hours. And Kim mentioned a lot on backups and recovery, as far as your data goes. I've found that, active BCP planning and recovery exercises, not necessarily just tabletop exercises, but actually restoring data periodically to validate that your processes are working, can go a long way to help when you have identified that you've been, infected or attacked. And I haven't, as far as dealing with law enforcement and stuff, and identifying when your backups are actually infected. I believe that, just active recovery practices and exercises can help you make sure that you're actually prepared when you do get hit by one of these attacks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, MJ, for joining us. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but maybe, I don't know how much of the conversation you've been able to catch. So I promise we're not being hacked. We just had technical difficulties.
No,
So,
I just need the question again because I'm trying to catch up.
yeah, so maybe in the seat that you sit in every day at Bath Iron Works, what are you doing to prevent and to monitor and detect to make sure that you're ready for any kind of a data leakage, or an extortion ransomware case, or what are the protocols that are most important to you to answer? Kim went through a lot of the basics, but you have a very I think you have very interesting clients where you sit. So, and you have contracts. So maybe it would be interesting to hear from you. What do you do on a daily basis?
So, I'm sure you guys covered all the basics of multi-factor authentication and backing up your data and stuff like that. But, I'm with the defense contractor. So it's critically important that we protect defense technology and defense research.
No, I think
so can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yep.
Sorry. So anyway, we do a lot of we do cyber audits, and last week we were going through penetration testing. The difference here is that cyber security does not fall under IT. And I'm a counterintelligence person. Prior to being here, I was at the Pentagon as a FBI SES, or a counterintelligence, subject matter expert. So I see security completely different than a lot of other people. I just don't see it in the cyber silo. Much like you heard from Carrie Webben yesterday, there's multiple vectors by which the adversary is coming in at us. This is, an asymmetric threat. And cyber is not the only way they're coming. So when Carrie quoted yesterday that counterintelligence division of the FBI, half their cases were China, not one of those was a cyber case. So people are so focused on the cyber because I think it gets the most publicity right now. But since I've been here, I've stopped other ways of someone getting into our system other than a cyber attack. So very aggressive, testing often, tabletop exercises, really making sure my people are prepared and that we're backing up our data.
Great. Thank you, MJ. So I don't know. I think we only have a few more minutes. We're going to be going to our coffee break. I think we're a little over time. But just in sharing that, I guess you intrigued me with what you said, MJ. So are you telling us that there's more ways to trap the mouse? Is it a physical and sort of social media and, a frontal attack by a bad actor? Are they using, different techniques because they know we're all onto them? Is that what you're?
Yes, you really have to partner with security. And I would encourage everybody to have money in their budget to hire a counterintelligence person. For example, we ordered 3 new servers and they didn't arrive. They were lost for 3 weeks. And when they finally did arrive, people were getting ready to hook them up. And I told them they couldn't hook them up to the network. If we can't identify where our technology is, we're not hooking it to our network. We've had foreign companies that disguise themselves as being US companies. But as I drill down on them, I find that they're in Russia. But the people here, that's not their job. They have another kind of job, building ships. So they're not thinking about security the way I am. So I would say since I've been here for a year, I've completely turned security on its head at this particular location. I think what you guys are doing, we all have to collaborate. You know, we have to come together, a whole of industry approach, much like we did in counterterrorism days after 9/11. So don't only think about the cyber vector patching and say, we're done. This is more than compliance. I think one of the previous speakers said we are risk hunting. I hunt every day for the bad guy.
That's really interesting. Well, so before we go into the coffee break, I guess I'd like to hear from Roselle and from Jennifer and everybody have some parting comments really quickly. I mean, what comes to your mind, what comes to the front of your mind and your heart, because we all are here because we're passionate. I know that because this is a very hard fight. And so, you know, I would love to hear just another comment or a piece of advice from all of you.
I would just say, to reiterate what everybody is saying, is stick with the basics. Do your multi-factor, make sure you're patching your systems, be vigilant, checking out for the phishing. It's these basic things that are going to be your first, front line of defense.
That's great. And Roselle, I guess you talked a lot about the backups and talking about the very basic line of defense. Maybe can you tell us how long do you have to keep those backups, or how often should you back up? I mean, I know it's different for everybody, but you have a company called that's protecting people's crown jewels, so you probably are the right person to give us some advice on that.
Well, it's really dependent on the environment, and so I would say first order of business is knowing your own environment. So we've spent lots of time and energy on understanding the adversaries, and to MJ's point, the adversaries are multifaceted. They're not just in the cyber realm. And so it does require this holistic approach. But in addition to understanding what the bad guys are doing, we have to know what we're doing internally. And if we don't, then we're at this huge disadvantage when we're already disadvantaged because the attackers only have to get it right once. And so I would say first order of business is understanding what's in your environment and making sure you have that layer of cyber hygiene around that. And so when it comes to backups, it really depends on what's the frequency of business in your environment. I mean, if a financial institution that is doing millions of financial transactions every minute is going to need a different type of backup schedule than a company that works at a much slower pace. And the time that's needed to bring a system back up is going to also vary depending on the situation. If you are in a hospital setting, that recovery time has to be instantaneous or very close to it. Whereas if you're in an organization that works at a slower pace, then maybe you don't need that type of requirement. So it's really dependent on your environment. So the first step is understanding what is your environment? What do you need to protect? How much downtime can you afford? And then backing out the rest of it from there.
Great. Thank you, Roselle. So MJ, any parting comments, or Kim? I mean, I'd like to know how you get trained in counterintelligence in the non-government sector, so that we can all have one of those people in our companies, because I think some of us are just very circumspect, right?
So you have to understand the threat. I don't think people understand how Russia does it. They do it different than China, Iran, North Korea with WannaCry. You need to hire people that understand threat, so they're looking for it. I said every time we have these things, they want to go out and hire more IT people. I'm like, that's really not the solution. You need a counterintelligence person, a counterintelligence analyst on your team, because these are all counterintelligence threats. So I would say this right here is a great community. The fact that we're all here talking about it, we're talking about counterintelligence. So yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to know more about it.
Okay.
Well, and I would just add in, my parting comment is executive education. It's really more than just a tabletop. It's making sure the executives really understand what a ransomware attack is and what the impact could be. There's no silver bullet to get out of, make it simple and have an easy response. the average time systems are down, whether or not you pay, is 19 days. That's 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks. So, is the company prepared? And once they really understand what the impact is of a ransomware, then it trickles down to the entities to help in the preparedness. So I think my parting comment is really to just make sure executives understand this threat and how significant the impact can be.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. That's such a good parting note. We can never leave out the executives because they do have the fiduciary responsibility, but also they lead the charge. And so if it doesn't trickle down, then the organizations will never get smart. So thank you. And Roselle, thank you for your insights, and Jennifer and MJ as well. So with that, we're going to go to a break before our next panel. But we're having another trivia break, so you cannot miss this, because you will miss out on the prize and miss out on what you know and what you don't know. And we'd be surprised. These questions are pretty hard. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thanks.